other important matters, I think, to raise about what might happen next, however. I'm sure in Malaysia there has been quite a lot of discussion about the fact that the US President does not have what is called fast-track authority. That is, even if the ministers reach an agreement here, the Congress is not required to accept the agreement as a whole or reject it as a whole, but they can pick it apart. They can say, we accept the concessions Malaysia has made, but we want more. And we will not accept the concessions the US has made to Malaysia, we want those reduced. Otherwise we will not vote for this agreement and it will not become ratified from the US end. Now that is a powerful tool for the US to be able to use in the negotiations to demand what it wants as a price for there being an agreement. In a rational world, ministers would not sign an agreement knowing that the US President cannot deliver on it. But this is not a rational process. This is a political process. It is a process that is driven by foreign policy considerations and relationships and by optimism and by political leaders in all of our countries who believe that ultimately something good must come out of this agreement, even if there is no evidence that shows that that in fact will be the case. In addition, even if the Congress approves this agreement, the US has an additional lever, which is that it can refuse to bring the agreement into force in relation to the US unless the US says Malaysia, for example, has changed its laws in ways that conform with what the US understands the treaty to mean. And if Malaysia changes its laws in the way that Malaysia thinks the TPPA requires, and the US says, no, we think it means this, Malaysia, you must change your laws to what we, the US, understand it to be, or the agreement will not come into force. So this is not an equal process. This is a process in which the US maintains not only enormous commercial leverage, foreign policy leverage, but also claims the right to have the final say. You can't negotiate these agreements in public. It's simply not the case. That is how it is going to be done, we understand, in the US-EU negotiations, and the EU has announced it will put before its people the draft investment chapter before it even tables it in the negotiations. So there is a very serious question about why in this negotiation there is this unprecedented level of secrecy that applies. It does not even fetter the negotiations in terms of disclosing a country's position in advance, because all we have been asking for is to see what all the other parties know. All the other countries know what our governments have put on the table. It's just the citizens of our countries don't know what our government's been putting on the table.
I don't think that anyone wrote hypothetical 96 pages of IP provisions. It's the real the text which has been negotiated in Brunei from August. Of course it changed a lot because since August until now there were 4 or 5 meetings, IP meetings. So we assume that they made some progress, but still the substance is the same. It's the US proposal, same provisions. I mean, we saw those provisions for the first time in 2011. Not much has changed. Only the countries put the brackets. So, and I think the final text will not be that different. Low-income countries will be subject to lower standards. They call it as lower standards, and which are mainly based on Peru FTA standard. There are 3 provisions. 3 controversial provisions. One of them is patent term extensions. For example, if the regulatory authority, the marketing authority, if it takes longer for marketing authority, the patent office has to grant patent term extension for the pharmaceuticals. This is one of the provisions, and it's in the text, but with the patent term extent, and it also applies to patent office delays.